Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Fell into Food Podcast. I am your host, Chef Jeff Fell. This week, back with me again is Ian Sutherland. If you go back to episode 58, you can check out all things hospitality chain and what that website does. But today, we're going to really focus on what Ian's bread and butter was, and that is with freight within the food industry. Well, freight in general, but we're going to be talking food and beverage industry. I mean, really, let's think about it. Not just your food and things that you can't get come from here. Think about your tables, your chairs, your glassware, your equipment. Anything that touches your restaurant has some impact by the global freight market and your local freight and supply chain. So that's what we're going to dig into, as he has such a history with that. So Ian, maybe just give us the quick 10,000 foot view of your background with freight and logistics.
Yeah, sure. Great to be on the podcast again too. Yeah, I've been in the freight industry for 30 years. My wife actually got me into it. So she'd been in freight from the time she left university. So she worked in shipping, all parts of shipping, containerization, air and sea, a lot. And I was down the waterfront at the time. So I've got a marine background from my father's side of the family. So I actually went to sea when I was a young man, to be honest, but it wasn't for me. So collectively, my wife and I, co-founders of World Freight, we've had probably around 55 years collectively in the industry. So we come with a lot of knowledge, and through that, we've dealt with food, beverages, and hospitality equipment and everything else along the way. But my background in specialised containers brought me into big events and designing refrigerated containers for easy use in those big events. So there's a big background, and in the mining industry, which is a big part of the whole supply chain to everything. So you've just come back from an expo yourself, and you probably look at that expo after, 3-4 days, and you were representing, was it Medco, the meat drying processor? Yeah. So just think of the mining industry and supply chains, how that works. And from raw material, from a mining sector, we go to iron ore is an easy one. So, I worked on all the big mining sites, supplying specialised containers, and the oil and gas industry. So especially a big project in Gorgon, which was run by Chevron. So how's this fit in? LNG is vital now all around the world. So you'll see those big tankers carrying LNG, and that'll be fueling ovens and kitchens and things all over the world and at homes everywhere. So that's vital. And then you're looking at the supply chains like raw material that goes into the manufacturing of, at the end of the day, everything you've seen in the expo. So that's where transport and hospitality and everything else. You look at your expo and the food, the beverage, setting up. There's all the freight that goes into set this thing up. And then you're at the expo for those days. Then it's all got to be taken out again. So that's, it's such a big industry. And
it's a production too, because this year I actually was more involved with booth setup and helping get things and supplies, and the amount of people that have to be involved to get product from point A to point B. And again, at the National Restaurant Show, our product is only going like 15, 20 miles because we're right outside the city. But the amount of options we had, our local carrier that we use all the time. We had our booth setup company. The show themselves have their own freight and logistics. And it's just interesting to see pricing, what has to be done from a setup standpoint. There was so much involved, and the amount of time we had to have things there. I want to say a month in advance. It was like a month and a half in advance just to be ready to get it to the show.
Yeah, exactly. And then you look at the people that are exhibited, the exhibitors coming from another country, say from Australia, and they want to get their beverage out there. And I know actually one quite well. They exhibited up in the States twice this year just to get their beverage out. Now, you've got to look at the documentation. You've got to freight it over there. Then you've got to go through, if you're exhibiting and people are trying a beverage and food and everything else, then all of, paperwork and everything else has got to be in place. Logistically, you've got to get there on time. When we're talking food, like, perishable, +4, frozen, -8, refrigeration comes into it. And what you said before, the time is critical. It's all got to work together.
So walk me through. Okay, I'm in Australia and I want to get product to the US for an expo. Like, walk everyone through what that process actually is. You say paperwork, and we talk customs, and we talk the motives of how product can get there. Try and like sum all that up of what actually has to happen for something to
Yeah.
get halfway across the world.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll put it down. Firstly, there's 4 modes of transport. So the 4 modes: air, sea, road, and rail. So you're going to have to look at the best mode for you, whether you've got just air freight going over there quickly, gets you set up, or it gets more intense. Like, you might be bringing a lot of manufactured equipment to a hospitality expo. So that's a different kettle of fish. Not just going to put that on a plane. Sometimes you can, but you might have to, you're looking at really big equipment with mixers and things like that when we're getting into the big stuff. Packing equipment. It goes on and on. I've been to expos where, they take up quite a bit of area and the weight. So that's going to be shipped. So it's a bit like international shipping with a buyer and a seller. You've got to get something over to another place. So you've got a thing called a bill of lading. You might use a freight forwarder to get that product over there to exhibit. So you go to a freight forwarder, he's going to pick up your equipment or whatever you're doing. He's going to arrange the shipping and that with you. Then there's a thing called a bill of lading. So it's best way to explain that is that a carrier will, it's a legal document where there's the consignor and the consignee at the they work. It's like an international trade. So you're going to move something to another place. So there's the place of pickup, place of origin to destination. So there's all that paperwork to work through. And then there's the customs at the other end. They're just not going to let anything in, especially food and everything else. You've got quarantine issues there, documentation, clearing goods and security. So start to put all that into the process. And then you walk up and what you're doing is doing your booth. So you're setting up your booth. You don't know actually what's happening to get all that stuff and then get it into the event, into where it's got to go. And then it's got to be, properly labeled. You don't want to open it up and find out your goods are damaged. So, it comes back, to that shipper of the goods that he's sending or you're sending. You might be the shipper. And then it gets up to the event and you want it in pristine condition. And if you're handling food, beverage of all types, you've got a lot of responsibility there before the first person walks through the door.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different docks and ports too. When we have stuff come over, is it going to come to the West Coast? Is it going to go to the East Coast? Is it going to go through, through Mexico, through the canals? There's so many ways and places that things go to and then get to their final destination after it hits the country of origin.
Yeah.
What does one determine when they're deciding, okay, I want my goods to go here versus here? Is it all cost based? Is it speed? Walk us through that.
Yeah, well, it's the whole lot. So basically, freight forward is very important, especially when you're handling, food, refrigeration, dangerous goods, things, flammable goods. So if there's anything flammable, and it can come down to batteries as well, in this day and age, lithium batteries. So that has to come into play as well. So there's all that documentation. So I would start with a freight forwarder, and that's where we've created the platform we've created for freight and for hospitality. You probably see how it works now. The two are so interconnected with each other. So it simplifies a lot of things. So if you're a novice in what you do, you can find probably a freight forwarder somewhere close to yourself that is going to arrange all of this for you, and time's critical. So they have to have a great relationship, one, with shipping lines, bring the cost down. There's third party, known as 3PL, third party logistics operators that, are critical in this whole setup too, because all of a sudden your freight forwarder might need another forwarder in another location. So you've got 2 or 3 ports to navigate to actually get there before you get to the port of destination. So there's a lot to look at and consider before you actually get to your event.
Well, and not even that. When all of our goods come over for a few of the brands that I work with, I've had a chance to now actually unload some of the containers. It's nothing what you think. You're just thinking, oh, there's a bunch of pallets and a bunch of boxes loaded up inside. Absolutely not. There
No,
is like foam bubble things that I've never seen before, like cardboard filled with air. I mean,
yeah,
everything is, but to your point, it's you can't move anything because if it does, it's going across on a boat. I mean, a
that's
lot
right.
of our stuff comes on a boat
Yeah,
because of the
correct.
costs.
Yeah,
And then even at the end of the container, they've got it nailed or screwed in almost like a gate, if you will, to make
correct.
sure that that holds exactly where it is. So
Yeah,
it's very interesting to actually get to unload something that's come directly from overseas to see how it's shipped, how it's packed, and how tight that they can actually get stuff into a container. Because when you hear the word container, that's what that means. The size of the container. Is it a
correct.
40 foot, 50 foot,
Hmm.
I don't know all the sizes, but there's different size containers.
Sure.
And that's different than, to your point, air freight. And what are you shipping? Some things may
Yeah,
not be able to go by air freight, or it's going to be so cost prohibitive.
correct.
But we're talking international. I think a really important product that people don't realize is fertilizer. Maybe let's talk about the impact of fertilizer. We've got everything going on in the world today, but I know that you've got a little
Wow.
bit to talk about on that topic.
Wow, that we what? So you just hit the nail on the head for me right there, because I was talking to my friend the other day. He'd be well known in this industry, in this fertilizer industry around the world. He brought that up. Now, you come from a farming background. Okay, so, okay, just give me your take on your farming background. Were you growing, or you got cattle on there, or those cropping?
Mostly crops, a lot of corn and soybeans, but immense amount of fertilizer used.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, fertilizer right now, that's a great topic. To work in hospitality and the logistics side of things, you know, it's made up of nitrate, phosphorus, potassium, and ammonium. Right. So these nutrients and things, food can't grow with it, basically. You need the nitrogens and everything, both one in your soil and one in your plant. So it's essential. Now, it's exported all over the world, fertilizer. Ukraine and Russia are big fertilizer exporters. America and Canada, China. Australia has a bit of its own, but not enough. So the whole world relies on the shipment of the supply chain of fertilizer. Without it, we've got a problem with our global food bowl. That's how important fertilizer is. But it goes in bulk shipping, so there's big loads of it. So there's a hole that's in mainly bulk shipping. I had a lot to do with it in containerization in containers. It's also, when you look at it, people won't believe this, but those nitrates and things that are in there, they're used in explosives. So in mining and defence, one, we're fertilising your ground and your food. But when we're talking ammonium nitrate, you've got to know how to handle it. Uh, I'm not going to get too much into it because it doesn't take much to make an explosive out of ammonium nitrate. It doesn't take too many ingredients and a detonator. And there's a good example that come to mind then in Lebanon, Beirut. I think it was back in around 214, 212, thereabouts. There was about 2,000, 2,500 tonnes stored, and I think it come off a ship that was under arrest or whatever. But it was stored in a warehouse in the port of Beirut, and it had been there for, I don't know, 6, 8 years. And this thing can sweat, like high ambience and things like that. It gets a little bit volatile. And apparently there was a fire in a warehouse next to it, and it blew that port to smithereens. I think there was 700 people killed. There was thousands of people injured. There was thousands of people that lost their properties. And when I heard that, I could imagine when that explosion happened, and it actually took a chunk out of the port. It changed the dimension of the port. It was just incredible, the damage and the loss of life that did. And there it is, 2,500 tonne of fertiliser, a fire which detonated, and it's nitrate. And that explosion, I could just imagine, I'd put myself in those people's shoes thinking, because I've been in that mining industry, that explosion would have been like a terrorist attack and an atomic explosion at that point. And that's what they put it down to. It was one of the biggest explosions in world's history outside of a nuclear explosion. That's the intensity of it. So when you look at that, also, you won't believe it, but, byproducts in fertiliser is used in a lot of food preparation, preservation of cryovac, cured meats, refrigeration. It's a multi-purpose product. And when you
And what are those byproducts? You're talking about curing and all those things.
Well, look, there's things like, I'm not a scientist, but in the meat processing, and curing and things like that. So ammonia is used in a lot of things, and cooling in the refrigeration side of things, baking. There's another thing, glycol, that's used in the mining industry for cooling, used in the food industry as well, in the bakery side of things, anything under temperature, car industry. So when you start to get down and really break it down, it's amazing what sort of products go into what, and a lot of it goes into into our food systems. So, we could go on that topic on fertiliser for a long time. As a matter of fact, I'm going to sit down at some stage and study it a bit more, because I've dealt a lot with it. There's other forms of fertiliser like urea. It goes into a lot of different manufactured goods. So from manufacturing, from industrial industries to the food industry to the farming industry, it's a multi-purpose. So you can imagine if the world supply chains had a big issue of supplying fertiliser, what a disruption.
Well, we've already seen it a little bit when the
Yeah.
war did break out in Ukraine and Russia. We weren't affected as much because a lot of it was the agriculture, and luckily, we have a large chunk of agriculture. Not that we don't need excess. We can't supply everything on our own, and we're feeling it as
Mm.
it comes to oil. Even though we have our own reserves and our own quantities because it's a global market, now it's affecting every bit of it.
Mm.
But how, like the trickle effect? People thought, okay, things are done, and they're like, well, why are prices still happening now, even though it's been, they're saying it's open and stuff can move. People don't realize that there's that trickle effect, that it doesn't just overnight correct itself. The supply has to get back up in order for things to stabilize.
Global economies are affected. We're still are today. Look at the instance, I'll call it the pandemic rather than anything else, but that was only 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago now. And I live in the most locked down city in the world. I'd hate to have that as a badge of honour, because it wasn't a badge of honour. Let me tell you, it was a nightmare. 268 days being locked down or some ridiculous point. It got to the point, if you try to get in the supermarket, there was a queue out there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and my wife said, "You'll have to come down with me to help me out." I said, "I do a lot of things, but I don't do the shopping. I can tell you where anything is on the shelf." I went down to help. She said, "Look, we better do a shop up just to be on the safe side." It got to the point, excuse me, we were getting to the point where we couldn't wipe our ass. It's a fact. There was people we knew walking out with bags and bags and packs of toilet paper and milk powder. And there was minibuses from other places coming in, and people were panicking and storing stuff and thinking, this is madness. And then we had to get to the point where we had to show our license. We know everyone in the supermarket. We've been here for 27 years. And I've got to cite your license. Odds and evens. I rolled up one day and they said, "Sorry, mate, you're in an even number. It's an odds number today." This is just an example how the whole thing gets affected right around the world, between something as simple as, go and buying your food, to the logistics supply chains getting cut off. And a supply chain, just to tell you how a supply chain works, it covers everything from the raw material, right from the mines and things of that nature. It goes through all the processes, and freight forwarders play a very big part of this. And third-party logistics, 3PLs. It goes right through all these systems. Then all the transport operations, you can imagine, rock trucks from a mine to a crushing area to a concentrate into a ship, bulk ship, taken to another part of the world, say China, manufacturing everything, moved again, goes out. Someone's building, maybe in America, building Harley Davidson bikes. So all those parts, glass, your tiles, zircon sand and things like that in bulk, and the whole lot. Nothing gets manufactured or eaten without the logistics. It depends what industry you're in.
Yeah, there's just when you hear vertical integration, like that's kind of like the ultimate. You have full control over what you're supplying somebody, and so you hear a lot of companies trying to go with vertical integration, so that way they're not reliant. Well, what happens when a shipping lane gets shut down? What happens
Mm.
when, for whatever,
Yeah.
there's a natural disaster in a country and they can no longer produce the raw
Mm.
goods that you need?
Mm.
That vertical supply chain just gives you more control over what you have. Because it touches everything, like you just said. The global supply chain, we need the entire world to make things kind of go round with the way that things are today. Now, if we went back to, primal and it's just, hey, I'm going to live on a
Yeah.
homestead by myself and provide food and the basics, that's one thing. But with all of our mechanics and all of our
Yeah.
technology, it's just funny and interesting how some things are harvested, let's say here in America, not just food, but how they're harvested. It's cheaper to ship them, like you said,
Mm.
across
Yeah.
the seas to be manufactured, to then be shipped back, to then be sold. It's just fascinating and blows my mind that we don't have more manufacturing, especially here in the States. I know some countries obviously just aren't big enough to physically manufacture, but it's always blown my mind that how many touch points there are before it gets to the consumer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. Like we had a big steel industry and a car industry in Australia. Wasn't that many decades ago. And I know back in my childhood, my father was on iron ships. He'd go from port to port around Australia in the iron industry. All that's gone. That whole industry's gone today. So you're right about the manufacturing, but it's another thing you tipped on before, Jeff. It's you got to see what happens when you open a container, and it blew your mind how much foam packs and packaging in there because they're taking the airspace out of the container. That destuffing, as it's probably known, it creates so much garbage. Like you can imagine out of one container what you pulled out: the
Oh
foam,
yeah.
the plastic, the cardboard, one container. Now around the world, this is where global waste, the control of this waste, that industry, the hospitality, leisure, travel tourism industry and the freight industry and the industrial industry, the biggest polluters on the planet. And so what do we do with all this plastic, all this gunk? What did you do with it? Put it in the dump master when you
Yep.
unstuffed it?
Yep.
Yeah, that was just you, one container. Imagine the supermarkets, all the stuff that is shrink wrapped. Everything that goes out, it's got to be shrink wrapped to a pallet to keep it tight on a pallet. Then there's the dunnage or the packaging that goes in to take the airspace out. So when that ship's in rough weather, that freight's not going anywhere. So they even have what's known as pogo sticks, like they're a piece of steel, and you can adjust them just to hold the freight down at some instances because you've got airspace in the top, stops it jumping. So those pogo sticks are used in containers a lot, and it's a very competitive industry. Like they seem to get the freight at cost, and how do we make a margin out of this? So they'll top up that airspace in a container with other products just to get that the payload. It's a tough game. You think hospitality is a tough game, and it really is, as you well know. But you combine it in the freight industry, it's so enormous. I'll give you a stat that of interest. And I spoke to Ingrid the other day. I said, what industry do you think is bigger in the world today? The hospitality, culinary, catering, and to throw travel and tourism into the same bag there, or the freight industry. It didn't take him long. And let me tell you what it'd be. I think there's something like about 370 billion people in the world. The workforce in hospitality, I think, is somewhere around 350 to 370 million. In the freight industry, as good as what AI is getting, it hasn't got the answer to everything. Their estimation is somewhere between 380 to 400 million. Now, you combine those two industries together, that's over 20% of the total workforce in the world. Just those two industries. That's how many people are employed around the world. That's quite a problem when you get your head around that. So we talked about fertilizer and, geez, how much, we rely on that in all forms of business. Then the freight industry and then the hospitality industry is at the mercy, our food is at the mercy to supply chains around the world. There really is.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to spend some time World Freight Direct. Right? We went over hospitality chain, but now, like we said, they're so interconnected. Maybe talk a little bit about what World Freight Direct is and why you actually even created that in the first place.
Sure. Well, it's like our discussion today. When we first started right back 18 years ago, I had this vision, as you know, from the first time we spoke about having a platform for non-commercial foods and things like that. There just didn't seem to be one. And I always had a thought that one day we're going to have dedicated industry platforms because you can't be something for everything all the time. But that time is now come because most platforms now are known as horizontal. There's something for everything, like e-commerce sites and search sites and everything else. You need structured industry vertical platforms. So AI can read it. And I didn't know this time was coming up behind us, but back then I knew there was, outside of the hospitality, freight industry was so intertwined in that industry. And I knew that this also needs to be a dedicated platform one day. So they'll integrate with each other because they rely so much on each other. So in freight, there's a thing right there. So it's an easy example to give you. The letter of credit. Now, that is a very, I would dare say that there would be a letter of credit cut almost every minute of the day somewhere around the world. Now, that letter of credit is a legal document. You've got the seller overseas, you've got the buyer over here. It's a guarantee that when you're buying from someone you don't know, they don't know you need a bank guarantee. Now, letter of credits are also there for people that import all the time, and they still want a bank guarantee that you might go broke at the other end of the day. Somebody's got to pay for my goods. And then the damaged goods, that goes, into insurance and things like that. I look at that letter of credit, it's a very cumbersome, long-winded, it's expensive to set it up, and every shipment you do. So in the freight side, we've got main categories and subcategories. I think we covered every aspect of it. But what's going to happen now is these letter of credits, I can see the time you look at e-commerce when you buy something and buy now, pay later, and then you post it out. Okay. That letter of credit, I think the banks are going to get involved and go online straight away, because I just heard yesterday that in Australia, you won't be going to see a bank manager anymore to get a bank loan. You'll be doing it online with a robot. I nearly fell over when I heard that. So, but that'll happen. Letters of credit, we can be able to do everything from that platform. So you're setting up for the first time, you'll be able to get on there and connect with a freight forwarder. So you might want to, I might want to import wine out of California, out of Napa Valley. I might want 3 or 4 different wineries. So I go on that site, and I'll get a freight forwarder to consolidate the goods for me up there and create a relationship, so I'm connecting with someone I don't know at all, but I know their capability, what they specialise in. I need to pay for this stuff. I could go into the fintech companies. They'll have all their governance and everything in place with their financial side of things. And they're already doing it with fintech now, payment gateways. It's all going to be done online. Couple of clicks and you'll have it in place. You'll have those things set up. So every aspect of World Freight Direct you'll be able to go to shipping lines, freight forwarders, relocators going overseas. We're talking diplomats. Well, you need a specialised removalist to do that. If you got a diplomat guy over there, you wouldn't want to give it to any Tom, Dick, and Harry removalists, would you? Not in today's world. So
Right.
there's all that information in one place, and we're putting a lot of work into that right now. We've just signed and put a lot of back end work in with their own algorithms into different subcategories and main categories. So then it becomes an easy place to connect, and that's the big thing. Being able to connect with custom agents in one side of the world to the other, people knowing your specialty in your supply chains and things like that. And then you'll be able to go on there and be able to find what you want. We're still building that. It's built. We're putting more and more companies' expertise in that area in around countries. But with the whole hospitality industry, you can see now exactly right back to that expo that we were talking about. It is those are so interconnected, those industries, to make them function every day. Because a food service industry, I'm not talking supermarkets because, we know supermarkets. You got the big warehousing that store all the stuff, supermarkets, goes in and out every day. The food service and the more, boutique beverages and things like that, they'll come in and you'll do a pick and pack there and it'll go out to a cafe. So, and a restaurant, a hotel, that type of thing. That supply is critical to get to them every day. Just imagine you would have been through this situation with your procurement of food and beverage in your background, and something doesn't turn up. It might be, the sous chef doesn't turn up for the day. You're already stressed, and then your deliveries haven't turned up for some reason. Or with refrigeration, breakdown in refrigeration, it's supposed to arrive at +4, and all of a sudden, hey, this stuff's off. There's a fine line between all of this. So when you marry it all up, it's totally interconnected. The timing, the deliveries, and the supply is critical. And you mentioned before too, like when you said weather, our weather patterns are changing dramatically, and we have droughts and floods down here, and 3 months apart from each other. It's and look at in America and Europe at the moment. So all that comes into play, along the way. And so, yeah, there's a whole lot of intertwined things that have got to happen. So we're trying to make it easier. We built the platform. Hospitality has got a massive database. It's up around 75,000 companies there now. None of them are the commercial shit food, and that it's all the specialty stuff that we're specialising in, and the equipment. It's a place where you can go to one platform and be able to do everything you need to do. And then it works as simple as this. You can go to the bottom of the footer, just click on to the other industry's logo, and you go straight to that platform. It's one click. And then you'll go to that direct platform. So, the cross-selling and services between those two big industries are going to become very simplified. Yeah.
I was just going to say, like if a food distributor, restaurant, group, or any sort of contract food service companies looking at World Freight Direct right now, it's like, what can they find there that they can't get anywhere else? And what would they need to bring? What would they need to bring to the platform for it to actually work for them?
Yeah. So look, I'll give you an instance. So there's a hard to find food from one part of the world, and it might be abalone, from Australia, whatever, around the world. And you just go to the categories and say, oh, yeah, they have got that. I want to bring that across, or caviar, or whatever it may be. So they look at that and they'd say, okay, this is the first time I'm doing this. I need a freight forwarder. So all of a sudden they're going to trade in this, so they can go back to their platform, and there's an easy start for them to actually go and find who they need to be able to do the logistics and the transport on that. So what we're doing right now is we're putting the real professionals in the right categories in freight. We're doing the same thing with hospitality. So then it becomes what's known as a industry ecosystem because they're vertical platforms. So AI can read both platforms. That's simple for them. But the main thing is that you can integrate AI software in both those platforms. So this is going to work at speed. So then you've got a letter of credit you can cut on the site. You can connect with, say, you might want to set up an agency to get your food chain working properly. So you can set up an agency with forwarder, shipper, transport. You look at all your transport companies, one lets you down, find another one, So we want to get all those specialised people that are good at what they do, those professional people. And we just could do it for a setup cost, to put them on there, make it cheap for them, and then they can interconnect within their industries, within an industry which becomes their biggest customer. So the fruit industry as a whole, globally, one of their biggest customer base is the hospitality, the wine industry. Just think of that for a moment, all the beverages. So all of that, they just, the cross from one button to another, to one platform to another, will create a total ecosystem. And then payments through the fintech technology that's on its way. You could just sit in your lounge room and say, I wonder where I can find this food. Well, if it's on that site, how do I get it there? So that's basically trying to put it in simple terms. The hard terms was building the bloody thing. 18 years ago, we rebuilt it 4 times and rebranded once. It was so difficult to explain what we were trying to do to an engineer back then. Today, at this fast-paced world, the first thing they'll ask me is, okay, it's a new platform. Is it a vertical, dedicated industry platform? Yep, great. And now we can use Claude, which we are doing. Chat we're using, and Gemini, So those 3 different AIs we can integrate it into the system. It's quite easy. So some of our posts we're doing now would take us days and days to do. It's not taking that time. So it's fast tracking the whole world, really, when we're talking the AI world. It's going to change the way we do freight logistics, the speed of it. And of course, I think in the hospitality industry as well. The ordering.
Yeah, I was going to say, I see a lot of agents
Yeah.
being connected. And by agents, I mean AI agents being able to talk almost autonomously, set up with a set of rules, instructions that says, hey, if someone's trying to get something from point A to point B, are these criteria met? And basically each side of the client or the agents can talk back and forth at speeds, obviously, that are way faster than human sending an email and saying, hey, tell me about this. Can you do this? It's just going to be instantaneous, and then it's going to know whether it's going to be a match or not. That's the way I see things going, to just get things that much faster. And then to your point, fintech will be built into that as another layer on top of it to say, okay, are they reputable? Do they have the funds? Where's the guarantee coming from? And it's almost going to be seamless of to your point, you're going to be able to click and say, I need to get wine from Napa to Australia. I click a button or I integrate. Okay, boom. And then AIs will talk, figure it all out. And then the human will actually pack the product or whatever it is and get it on its way.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And we're not talking big supermarket chains here and everything that we're doing the logistics side of it, Yeah, of course. But we're more specialised, and you can imagine now, I don't have to tell you, you're representing one right now. The hospitality equipment, the innovation that's coming there is going to be massive. Things you're doing now, like drying meats and things of that nature that would have taken a long time to do, That whole world's changing. But the other thing, you mentioned email. I tell you, nobody answers emails anymore unless you personally know and say, it's my private email. We know, like LinkedIn, I'm just getting bombarded by SEO people. I just, I spent the first half hour just deleting more SEO. We're doing it ourselves, but I understand where they're coming from too. Because at the end of the day, if you send an attachment to someone, hey, this is what we do. They're too scared to open it up.
Yeah, it's true.
So all of a sudden, the fax machine went when the email came out. And all of a sudden, email now, it's just people that know each other and trust each other that are using it. So how else are we supposed to connect? And that way, social media, as we know about platforms and, LinkedIn, we found each other through LinkedIn, and then you get to know each other. You give each other your personal email, but you go and put your products out there and you want to sell from one part of the world, then you need to get it to the other part of the world. You need to pay for it if you haven't got the experience of any of that. You could use it as a just knowledge and search, but you're creating relationships. And that's what I think everything's about in today's world. You've got to create that relationship, professionalism of what those people do, what they're good at, and know how it's integrated. And then the layers, what you mentioned before, will happen. So those vertical platforms, they can be layered. Horizontals can't. So the ones that are horizontal now, and I love Amazon as a company. It does its own freight, and it's got its big distribution centres, known as DCs. So it's storing product, it's moving the product, and people are buying on it. It's got guardrails around it, where other horizontals haven't, because they haven't got the layers to integrate everything. So Amazon's a little bit more protected in that area, but they have to build verticals on a horizontal now to be able to plug in, AI generated software and stuff like that. So it has, when you've been in the industry, point of sale, POS, that's going to change dramatically with AI.
Yeah, it already is. At the NRA show, you saw that with all these platforms and what they're bringing, and it's now helping operators with the data that you normally would have to aggregate manually. Your sales, all of that is now integrating to the back of the house to say you sold X amount, and this works more for traditional restaurants with a physical set menu.
Yeah.
But you sell X amount of a product. Well, it's now talking to the back of house to say automatically, well,
Correct.
if you sold that, here's what you should have left over. Here's what all that kind of stuff.
The inventory,
It's feeding in it's automatically feeding in the weather. It's feeding in all that analytical data to help an operator forecast to the future to say, hey, similar to what happened, 2 weeks ago, this is what's happening. You should adjust how much you think you're going to make based off of X, Y, and Z. So they figured out, they finally kind of really got the front of house helping dictate the back of house. Whereas before it was, you kind of aggregated that data. You kind of took your own analysis of what you think was going to happen, or you pulled those reports and then you made a judgment. Well, the AI and technology built into the platforms is doing that for you.
Absolutely. And, it's all driven by data, as we know, that, it can read all this, store everything, from a procurement side of things, from your ordering and know what your inventories are. Data information is going to become all important to AI, because that's how it learns everything. So it's having a massive effect on a lot of software. I'm sure it's right around the world. Australia's certainly feeling it. I know a few people in the software industry that have developed software that thinking, I never thought this day would come, because you need a lot of people to keep that software working correctly and everything else and develop it, because there's always somebody else bringing out another product. And that in this world today, there's another faster, better product and can do so much more. And that's the world we're living in. And the only thing I wish they'd slow down on, and you would totally agree with me, Jeff, is stop mucking around with fast growing food and all that shit. Honestly, we've got to get back to wholesome.
Well, it's there's a fork in the road from what I see right now. I see a lot of people are just they're AI'd out and they're roboted out. So they want to go back to connection. They want to go back to the people, but tech and AI is not going anywhere, and there's a lot of money behind it. And so you have the other fork that is how do we optimize it to make it better to where people will adopt these things as a social norm, seeing these type of things. They're still too big. They're still a little too clunky. They're still too robotic, if you will. And so I think people are still like, it's not where it needs to be. And so that piece of it's where we're seeing, to your point, is the software, the things that are very easy to change out. And for an operator, honestly, if they can build their own software or their own application, for $100 a month for, a subscription to an AI, and it codes everything for you, but it built it exactly to how you want it.
Yeah,
Then
customize it.
why do you need to pay an enterprise, $5,000 a month or whatever it is
Totally agree.
for a license?
I totally agree. Like I think they should be paying from us, $500 a year. You're on it every minute of the day with a premium listing. So, but you touched on it again, like that personal side of thing is, it's becoming difficult now. Like you get onto something, you're talking to a robot. Like if somebody wanted a premier listing, they can get onto our email or ring us, and we're there. And we'd say, well, listen, what marketplace are you looking for? That's the first thing. You've got to ask those questions and, sort of what's your budget? What can we do for you? And this is where we think you should be positioned in this food group, in this subcategory. And they can at least talk to you and we'll talk back to them. It's getting really difficult today. Like, again, to get a mortgage on a house, it'll all be done by AI. It's like, there goes the bank manager. Well, I'd rather go and talk to the bank manager. But seriously, what? You and I are talking today, it's got to have some personal side of it. We know the speed we're running at, but we can't lose the personal. It's the relationship.
Yeah,
So,
that's what it is. It's all about the relationship. That's the thing that technology can't take away from us. There's just something about being in the same room, or it's one thing to be on a call like this, but it's another to be physically sitting next to somebody in a room. There's just a different energy. You can feel emotions. You can understand tone even better. There's no lag. There's no delay. It's real time what's going on. And I agree with. I think things they're going back, but at the same time they're going forward. It's two steps forward, one step back type thing.
Yeah, it is. And look, I think, to be honest, and you're in this group. Our two sons are in this group. Is it Gen Z? Is that the group? Well, I get lost.
I'm technically millennial, so I'm still I'm part of the last order that had the old school way of things. So,
well, I'm the very old school. I think I'm classed as a baby boomer. They ask me what that means, but that means born in the 50s and 60s. Right? But we probably had the best of it back in them days, through the 70s and 80s. But it's the next generations that are going to change this whole thing. And I think when we're talking back to hospitality, nutritional food, get your health back through what you eat, what you drink, the nutritional stuff. Why are we tampering with that? And when we're talking our atmosphere and everything else, we got to start burning a lot of this, rubbish now, because we've got no more landfill. I'm talking in our own sort of area here. And I'm thinking, that's more shit going up in the air and everything else. And as you see, that container probably would have blown your mind at how much shit you had to pull out of there, time consuming, into a dump master, one container. You imagine all those containers around the world that's de-stuffing with all that shit. It's the banding and the carport and all stuff they just punch into the sides of crap, just so it doesn't move, It changes the whole way you're thinking about things. So, our climates and temperatures, we just got to protect that. We've got to protect how we grow our food. We don't need to be modifying any of that shit. Like you look back in the old days, they were living for hundreds of years. Their waterways were pure, their air was pure, the soil was pure, their food it wasn't contaminated. It was a different world. Sometimes you got to sort of look back and think, I think we need to switch the button back. As quick as what we're moving forward, there's got to be the other part where there's a bit of equilibrium.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Well, you know what they say, history repeats itself. And I think we're starting to turn some of that. Ian, we touched on a whole lot of stuff on the supply chain. I mean, there's obviously so much more. I will put everything into the show notes, World Freight Direct, hospitality chain. Of course, fantastic place to go for resource. You've got both in one place. So we'll get all that into the show notes.
Yeah.
Ian, any last parting words before we wrap this up?
Well, look, the first hour inaugural podcast, I look back on that and it took me for a walk down memory lane. Seriously, I said, shit, we did it 18 years ago. And you'd know now because you're out there doing it for yourself. I thought, shit, they were hard yards. They were seriously hard yards. It was, we don't mind working hard, but when you're getting something that's big as that off the ground, it's no easy path there. Today, I think we sort of understood, with the questions and answers back and forth. You come from the game and you've seen it now, and you understand pretty well how those logistics and the hospitality industry works. So today was a different podcast. I've enjoyed being on the show, mate.
Yeah, absolutely love seeing you, chatting with you again. Everything will be in the show notes, and until next time, we'll catch you on the sunny side.
All the best, buddy. Thanks, mate.